Hello everyone, this is Kristina Warner and you're watching day 10 of the holiday card series for 2024. Going to be using this stamp set called Peaceful Trees. It's from CZ Design and you may have seen some watercolors in the background there. Pay no attention to those. I was testing out some different techniques and I did not decide to go with watercolor for these cards. Instead, I'm going to be doing two cards. The first one has some multicolor stamping on it. So I have a piece of 5x7 white cardstock here. This is just my regular, Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 80-pound cardstock. And I've placed the cardstock on a MISTI grippy mat so that I can have it stay in the center of my MISTI while I do stamping over and over and over again. I don't want that piece of white cardstock to move at all because I'm going to be stamping this row of trees multiple times in different colors of ink. And so I want that paper to stay exactly where it's at for each time I stamp. I'm starting out with the color Dragonfruit, and I applied that ink at the top of the trees, and then I used a blending brush to kind of just soften the color kind of at the bottom of where I applied the ink. I'm now using the color Clementine. These are all colors from Concord and Ninth, by the way. I used an orange blending brush to just soften the bottom edge of the Clementine area. I also softened the top just a little bit. And then you can see where the ink colors overlap. I start to get a transition of color. This is a very kind of artistic inky look. It's not going to be perfect, but I think it looks really, really cool. And having such a large image, with these 5 trees coming down to the horizon line, they're very solid images. So it's perfect for this particular technique. I moved on to the color Buttercup, to nice golden yellow color, and then to Parsley. So I'm getting closer and closer to the bottom of this image. I've only got one more color after this. So I'm kind of bringing that Parsley down a little bit further, softening the top edge, and also I also softened the bottom. But I want to make sure I don't lose the yellow in there. So I overshot and I didn't even have enough of that green to fill in the gap. So before I move on, I'm coming back to Buttercup, adding in yellow kind of where that gap is, where there isn't much color, and stamping again. And that's going to kind of fill in a little bit of that very faded center area on the trees. My last color is Oceanside. So I'm putting that at the very bottom of the trees. And I want this to be very, very solid when I stamp it. So after the first time that I stamped the Oceanside color, I didn't like the bottom of it. It wasn't as solid as I wanted. So I went back and I stamped the Oceanside area twice, just one more time, mostly focusing on that very solid area at the bottom. And this really filled in that gap. As the other thing that you need to keep in mind is that these inks, when they dry back, they do smooth out quite a bit. So even if it does look kind of splotchy at first, it will look very smooth and blended out, when you've let it dry. So I cleaned off those trees and I'm going to go on and work on a second card. I'll come back to that first one. But for now, I'm using Tidepool, Juniper, and Peacock. And I thought I would just ink blend on this piece of white cardstock. Once again, that's 5x7 white cardstock. And this ink blending was just taking too long. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to go direct to paper and have kind of a fun textured look with the colors. So I started with Tidepool, added on just a bunch of texture, kind of dabbing on the ink pad. I'm taking it at an angle down to the paper, so I'm only really getting that top edge of the ink pad. I don't want to just do a whole full rectangle on my white cardstock. I mostly just want to get some kind of brushing motions with that edge of my ink pad. So I moved on to the color Juniper, and then, I thought I'd put it away, but no, I'm going to come back in. I'm going to do even more. I really just wanted to fill in all of this area. So there's a helicopter going overhead. You might be able to hear that. So now I'm coming in with my third color, Peacock, And it was a little bit dry, but I did have one edge that I just recently re-inked. So I just turned my ink pad around and I was able to get a little bit more ink on that one edge of the ink pad. But really, I just wanted to get these smears and smudges with my ink pad, trying to get lots of color down. I think eventually I did end up re-inking this ink pad just because it was a little bit too splotchy for what I wanted. But you can see how it starts to fill in all of that color, and it's got a very textured, uneven look. So I used my heat tool just to see what this would look like when it was dried back a little bit more. And then I applied more color, just bringing in more of that ink, especially the Juniper. I just wanted there to be a little bit more of a transition from Peacock to Juniper. Hit that with my heat tool. And then I came back in with just a little bit more Peacock right up there at that edge. I wanted it to be filled in more. So I hit that with my heat tool. And then I'm going to do the same tree stamping on this. I'm using that grip mat again so that I can have my trees go off the edge of the card design, and I'm placing that right at the bottom. I'm using some Obsidian pigment ink from Altenew. It's a black ink, and it fills in solid images like this just beautifully. I thought it would work great for this stamped image, and it really did work great. I only had to stamp this once. In fact, I was really careful. I used a press tool on my MISTI. I think I also used my elbow. I went in there and gave the whole stamped image CPR. And when I lift it up, look at that. Totally solid with the black. I did not have to stamp it multiple times. So when you remove these from your grip mat, you're going to want to bend the mat more than the project, because that will release it and it will help the project from getting all warped and curled up. So just going from each direction, bending that mat, and then pulling the project away from the mat. I used my heat tool to dry this quite a bit. I'm going to be doing some heat embossing for my greeting, so I wanted to make sure that that was dry. And I didn't trust that it was completely dry, so I'm actually going to do a powder tool and do a test run with my embossing powder. This is going to make sure that I don't have embossing powder everywhere, and I'm glad I tested it because it was most definitely not dry. Look how much embossing powder was sticking to my background. And I'm not surprised. I mean, I did, squish the ink pads directly down onto the paper. So there was a lot of ink there. So I hit it with my heat tool for a second time, a little bit longer this time, tested it again with more of that powder tool. And I realized that wherever I applied the powder tool, the embossing powder slid right off. It was great. But even at those edges where I did not apply powder tool, the embossing powder was sticking. So I brushed off that embossing powder, and then I kind of figured I was probably safe to go ahead and start stamping. I just needed to make sure I applied my powder tool very well. So I put that powder tool on, and then I placed my stamps. I'm using the Greetings Peace to You and Yours from the stamp set, and I'm stamping them in white pigment ink from Simon Says Stamp. This is going to give me really solid lines on these letters for my greeting and give me a great chance to have a wonderful embossed greeting. So I stamped that down, and then I applied some Alabaster embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. It's my favorite white embossing powder. Use it all the time. So I'm just sprinkling that on and tapping off the excess. And like I had before, I had a little bit of that powder up there at that top edge of the card, but I just used a clean brush to brush that away. I used my heat tool to heat set the embossing powder till it was smooth and melted. And then I stamped a greeting for that first card that I did. I'm using some pitch black cardstock from Hero Arts. And I picked a different greeting from the stamp set that just says Season's Greetings. And I stamped that in the white pigment ink as well. I prepped the area with that powder tool before I stamped, and then applied the white embossing powder, the same white embossing powder. So I hit that with my heat tool until everything was melted. And then I'm going to clean up any of that residual anti-static powder tool, which I had applied very liberally all over my cardstock. And you could really see it on this black. So even though I used a microfiber towel to kind of clean that up, and it does take off a lot of that powder, I also rubbed my fingertips over it. Sometimes the oils from your hands will pick up that powder and get rid of it. You can't see it anymore. So I use my fingertips as well. Use that towel on my other card. And then I came back to it and I decided I wanted to add some paint splatter so that it looked like snow. So I'm protecting my greeting area with a little bit of mint tape from scrapbook.com. It's kind of like a Post-it tape. And I used some white gouache on a brush, and I was trying out doing some paint splatter by tapping the brush. That's not my usual method, and it was very messy. So here at the end, I actually went back to my preferred method, which is to use it off the edge of an acrylic block, where you brush it off off the edge, and it gives you a little bit more direction on where those paint splatters are going. And I was able to fill in some of those gaps using that method. When I removed this tape off the greeting, it kind of had a lot of space up at the top that didn't have any snow. So I decided to add just a little bit of more splatter just to fill in those areas. And then eventually went in and just dabbed on some snow. I just wanted a little bit more control over where that would end up. I didn't want any really big globs of white paint to be too close to the greeting. And this worked out well to first mask it off and then add in some of that paint splatter just by hand. Cleaned up my work surface, and then I used one of my dies from my Kristina's Essential Die Set. I just used the Sentiment Strip die to cut out the season's greetings using my die cutting machine. That worked really, really well. So I am going to cut down just one of these cards. I wanted to cut down the rainbow one. So I'm using my A7 Layers from Waffle Flower, and I'm using a slightly smaller die so that it can be matted on my card. So I moved that kind of down to the bottom left corner and then ran that through my die cutting machine. For the back of it, I just put some foam tape, some really wide foam tape, and then put that down onto a white 5x7 card base. Almost done with this card. I'll just have to deal with the greeting here in a moment. I put some foam on the back and then put that down right over the center of the trees. And that's going to finish that first card. I think it turned out so well. It's so clean and simple. I love all that white space. For the other card, I put some Altenew ultra sticky tape, I can't remember what it is. It's about 1-inch wide tape. I put that all over the back of my ink blended card design and then put that directly on the front of a 5x7 card base. And that finishes that card as well. That's a completely one layer card. So here are my 2 cards for today for day 10 of the holiday card series. I could make 5 million more cards using this stamp set from Kathy Zielski. It's brilliant. I love it so much. The sizing works great for 5x7 cards. And I really just want to create multiples of these. I think they turned out great. So I will be back on Monday with a pre-recorded video. I'm traveling next week, so I will not be live. So come back on Monday morning. I will have a brand new video for you. It will be day 11 of the holiday card series. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.